If you are watching this, then they have done it. They finally did what they spent 40 years dreaming about. The missiles landed, the compound fell, and I am gone. But before the smoke cleared over Tehran, before the news anchors finished their sentences, before Washington poured its champagne and Tel Aviv lit its celebratory fires, I made sure this message would reach you, because there are things the world needs to hear, things that no press release will carry, things that no obituary will dare to print, and I recorded them myself with my own voice, so that when I could no longer speak, this would speak for me. My name is Ali Hosseini Khamenei. I was the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran for 36 years. I was 86 years old, and I was not afraid. What you are about to hear is not propaganda. It is not a political statement engineered by my advisors. This is the unfiltered account of a man who looked across the length of his life, stared at the forces that wanted him destroyed, and chose with full clarity exactly how he wanted to be remembered. Strip away the labels they put on me, strip away the headlines, strip away the fury of Washington, and the smirking satisfaction of those who celebrated my death in the streets of cities that owe their stability to the very resistance I built. Because once you hear what I know about what was planned, about what was betrayed, and about what is coming next, you will understand that killing me was not a victory. It was the ignition of something they do not have the architecture to contain. In the next few minutes, I am going to tell you exactly what I knew. I am going to tell you what I saw coming, and I am going to tell you why the empire that killed me is already bleeding from the wound it opened. So, let us begin. I want to take you back to February 17, 2026. 11 days before the missiles fell, I stood before a gathering in Tehran and I said words that the Western media replayed endlessly after my death, mostly to mock me. I told the world that the United States of America is heading toward collapse. I told them that 50% of their own population did not approve of their own president. I told them that any attack on Iran would be met with a response that would shake the foundations of the region. And I told them, and I want you to hear this precisely, I said my body holds little value, my life bears no significance. Even if they kill me, do not count it as our loss. They thought I was being theatrical. They thought I was performing martyrdom for domestic audiences. Some of my own inner circle thought I was speaking in metaphor. I was not speaking in metaphor. I knew, I had known for weeks. Let me tell you what I knew. Evidence, not rhetoric, calculation, not emotion, because I did not spend 36 years leading a nation by operating on emotion. I operated on data. I operated on intelligence. I operated on the cold arithmetic of power. The first thing I knew was that the CIA had compromised our inner circle. This is not a conspiracy. This is confirmed now. Reuters reported it. The New York Times printed it. The CIA helped identify a Saturday morning gathering of Iran's top leadership in Tehran, including me, including Ali Shamkhani, including my most trusted advisors. They mapped the room. They tracked the phones, they triangulated the compound, and they handed the coordinates to the Israeli Air Force. I want you to understand what that means. It means someone in my proximity, someone who sat at my table, someone who attended my briefings, was reporting our movements to Washington. The betrayal came from inside. I want every Iranian to let that land. The greatest threat to the Islamic Republic in 36 years did not come from an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. It did not come from an Iron Dome battery in Tel Aviv. It came from a traitor with access to my schedule. America did not outfight us. They outcorrupted us. Remember that distinction. The second thing I knew was about the minerals, not the missiles, the minerals. The world has been consumed by the theater of military confrontation. And while every analyst on television argued about air defense systems and strike packages, they missed the actual battleground. Iran sits on some of the most strategically vital mineral reserves on the planet: chromite, copper, zinc, uranium. And in a world where every advanced weapon system, every energy transition, every semiconductor race runs on critical materials, our geography was our greatest weapon. I knew that when Washington moved against us, it would not be primarily because of nuclear calculations. It would be because we sat on resources they could not control.
resources that China was already negotiating for, resources that Europe was quietly desperate to access without American permission. They did not bomb Iran because they feared our missiles. They bombed Iran because they feared our independence.
There is a profound difference. The third thing I knew was this: they needed it to be fast. They needed it to look clean. They needed a decapitation, remove the leadership, announce the collapse, declare the regime over, and then rush in a transitional framework before the Iranian people had time to think. I studied American military doctrine for decades. I read their own strategists. I read Kissinger. I read Brzezinski. I read the Rand Corporation reports on Iran's succession architecture. Their entire plan depended on a power vacuum so sudden and so disorienting that resistance would be impossible to organize. They needed chaos to precede them. They needed the Iranian military fractured. They needed the IRGC paralyzed by grief before it could recalibrate its command structure. That is precisely why, before any missile fell, I gave my final order to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to the commanders whose names I will not speak here because their safety now depends on their anonymity. I sent one message. I said, I give you all the power. You will determine how to continue this war. I transferred authority completely, not partially, not conditionally, completely, because I understood that the worst thing I could do in my final hours was create a succession crisis. And so I dissolved the question of succession in the only way that mattered in that moment, by making the institution greater than the individual, by making the revolution irreducible to a single name. Washington thought that killing me would decapitate the resistance. What they did not calculate is that I spent 36 years making myself dispensable to the structure I built. I was never the engine, I was the architect. The engine runs without me. Now I want to speak to the world about what comes next, because this is the part that matters. This is the part that will reshape the map you thought you understood. There are 3 possible paths forward, and you should think carefully about each one. The first path is what Washington is praying for. It is the collapse scenario. Iran fractures, the IRGC splinters along factional lines. The clerical establishment cannot agree on a successor. Protests erupt. The people who resented my rule, and yes, I know they exist, I was never naive about that, rise up in numbers that overwhelm the security apparatus. The Islamic Republic, after 47 years, disintegrates from within. Washington calls this regime change. They have wanted it since 1979. They have funded it. They have sanctioned for it. They have assassinated for it. And now they believe they have finally unlocked the door. I will tell you honestly, this path is possible. I am not in the business of false comfort. Any empire that strikes the head of a system creates conditions for internal rupture. The question is whether the body knows how to survive the surgery. The second path is the escalation spiral. This is the scenario that should terrify every government on earth that believes it lives outside the blast radius of this conflict. Iran retaliates, not immediately, not blindly, but with precision targeting that transforms the Persian Gulf into an uninvestable zone. Strait of Hormuz operations, satellite infrastructure disruption, Hezbollah's remaining capabilities activated along Israel's northern border, Houthi operations against Red Sea shipping intensified beyond what the world has yet seen. The price of oil does not merely spike, it shatters the ceiling. Every economy on earth that runs on hydrocarbons, which is every economy on earth, absorbs the shockwave. The American stock market, already brittle from tariff wars and inflationary pressure, does not simply correct, it convulses, and in convulsing, it pulls governments down with it. This path does not require Iran to win a military confrontation. It only requires that the cost of America's aggression become unbearable for American households in Arizona and Ohio and Pennsylvania, who will ask, very simply, why are we paying $5 more for everything because of a war in a country our children cannot find on a map? The third path is the one I spent my entire career engineering. It is the realignment. It is the world I saw coming before most leaders had the courage to name it. China has already issued its statement condemning the strikes. Russia has already withdrawn its ambassador from consultations in Washington. Pakistan, Turkey, and Malaysia are watching not because they loved me,
but because they understand that if a sitting head of state of a sovereign nation can be eliminated by a joint U.S.-Israeli operation with no Security Council resolution, no declaration of war, no international legal framework, then every leader in the global south just learned something fundamental about their own mortality. The rules-based international order that Washington preaches did not protect me. It will not protect them.
And the accelerating construction of an alternative economic architecture, the expanded BRICS framework, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the new bilateral mineral agreements I personally helped initiate between Tehran and Beijing, those do not disappear when I disappear. They accelerate. Because now every nation that Washington has pressured, sanctioned, threatened, or humiliated has a crystalline example of exactly what Washington does when the pressure does not work. They kill you, and in killing you they validate everything you ever argued about their character. I want to speak now to the young people of Iran, to those who cheered my death in London and Los Angeles and Stockholm. I understand your anger. I governed imperfectly. I made decisions that caused suffering that I carry the weight of. I know that women marched in streets and paid prices that no human being should pay for the act of uncovering their hair. I know that journalists were imprisoned for sentences I will not recite here without shame. I know that the gap between the ideology I served and the governance I delivered was real, and that real people lived and died inside that gap. I am not asking you to mourn me. I am asking you to think clearly about what comes after me, because the forces that killed me are not interested in your freedom. They are interested in your compliance. They are interested in Iran that opens its mineral reserves to Western corporations, that hosts American military bases on its soil, that abandons the nuclear capability that is the only credible deterrent against exactly the kind of strike that killed me this morning. They will offer you democracy. They will offer you liberation. They will offer you a vision of Iran integrated into the Western order, and they will not tell you the price until after you have signed. I want to address Washington directly, because I know your intelligence services will analyze this recording. I know your think tanks will dissect it. I know that some of you, reading the transcripts, will feel the satisfaction of having eliminated a long-standing problem. You should know this. I was a problem. I was an obstacle. I was inconvenient. I built a network of deterrence that made your regional ambitions expensive, and you removed me. I acknowledge the operational achievement, but I want you to explain something to the parents of soldiers who will now deploy to a theater that has been destabilized beyond anything your pre-strike modeling predicted. I want you to explain the oil prices to the voters who believe that confrontation with Iran would make their country stronger. I want you to explain to the architects of the new coalition, the one being assembled right now in capitals, you underestimate why the lesson you just taught the world is the most dangerous lesson any superpower has taught since 1945. You taught the world that if you build a bomb, no one will touch you. You taught every nation watching that the only protection against American power is the deterrent America most fears. You did not weaken proliferation. You guaranteed it. My body held little value. I said that. I meant it. I am 86 years old. I lived more than most men are permitted. I led a nation through wars and sanctions and assassinations and earthquakes of history that would have dismantled lesser institutions, and I leave behind a structure, imperfect, contested, fractured at its edges, but a structure that was never dependent on my heartbeat. The resistance is not a man, the resistance is an idea, and you cannot drop a precision munition on an idea. You cannot sanction an idea out of existence. You cannot bribe an idea into compliance. You cannot celebrate an idea's death on Truth Social and expect the world to believe the idea is finished. I recorded this message because I wanted the record to be complete. I wanted the version of history that comes without a publicist, without a diplomat, without a layer of strategic ambiguity designed to preserve future negotiations. You are hearing the last words of a man who knew the missiles were coming and chose, with every hour remaining to him, to prepare the world for what comes next, rather than negotiate for more time. He did not want. The question this moment forces on every person watching, whether you are in Tehran or Texas, in Berlin or Beijing, is not whether I was right or wrong. The question is simpler and more urgent. When the most powerful nation on earth decides that the rules apply to everyone except itself, when alliances are discarded and sovereignty is vaporized and leaders are killed in their own compounds at breakfast, who is safe? Who is next? That question does not belong to Iran alone. It belongs to every nation that has ever been told to be obedient. The world that existed before this morning is over. The one that comes after it will be defined by how clearly people understand what happened here. I hope you understand it clearly. Ali Hosseini Khamenei. This message was recorded to be released upon my death. It has not been edited. It has not been filtered. It is complete. Share it before it disappears.